Thank you.
Ms. Insir, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. It is with sadness we see how the praised reformist agenda of Ethiopia is taking a serious hit. Reports of thousands of people fleeing from Tigray, hundreds of people being killed through machete massacres, along with federal planes bombing are deeply disturbing. And so is the ethnical targeted measures, hate speech and allegation of atrocities. It risks also to have a destabilizing effect on the broader region. This is less than a year since Prime Minister Abiy got the Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel Peace Prize doesn't mean that one can start acting in contrary after receiving it. Both sides need to immediately end the violence and contribute to a peaceful solution. And international observers must be able to access Tigray region. It is a war crime to target civilians. Only solution forward is dialogue, including all the relevant actors. It is imperative that the country returns to the path towards a democratic and prosperous future, and the respect of human rights and are upheld and included the rule of law is the key. Thank you.
Mr. Stefanuta, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, if you're watching this, if your people are watching this, in a multi-ethnic state, no one should be allowed to have the upper hand. Ethiopia cannot be allowed to descend into a Yugoslav-type conflict. That is not the soul of your country. Mr. Abiy, you achieved a lot. You slashed corruption. You achieved for more democratic openness. But you have no excuse for driving 4,000 people a day across the border to Sudan. No excuse for not sitting at the table of the African Union and of the United Nations and not listening to the EU, for not allowing for humanitarian aid into Tigray, for not protecting people enough so that they have to flee Addis if on their ID happens to be the wrong ethnicity. The longer blood flows, the harder it is for peace to triumph. There is a point in a war where it is easier for people to revenge than to listen. Mr. Abiy, my colleague Mrs. Zovka reminded you of what you said last year. Let's step back from this ugly place. The European Union is here to help. Let's bring back construction. Let's bring back peace.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Commissioner. Mr. Lenarčič, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, honourable members of the European Parliament, since the fighting broke out in Ethiopia's Tigray region, reports of a high number of casualties, of serious human rights and of serious international humanitarian law violations have been increasing. This is a major concern for the European Union, and we were saddened by the tragic loss of lives of Ethiopian people as a result of this conflict. The danger of a major humanitarian crisis is imminent, and an immediate de-escalation is needed. All parties should show restraint and reinforce their calls to avoid incitement to hatred and violence. As a Commissioner in charge of humanitarian affairs, I have been following closely the situation on the ground. I have been in touch with Mark Lowcock, the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, with Filippo Grandi, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, with Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as with the international non-governmental organisations. In the past few days, we have already allocated initial €4 million to accommodate the most urgent humanitarian needs of Ethiopian refugees who fled the conflict to neighbouring Sudan. Sudan is already hosting a substantial number of refugees and internally displaced persons, and it is facing a considerable challenge with any new influx of people in need. I will visit Sudan next week to show solidarity with the Sudanese government that supports the Ethiopian refugees and to meet refugees themselves. As High Representative Borrell recalled at his meeting with Deputy Prime Minister Mekkonen of Ethiopia on Tuesday, the principles of international humanitarian law must be respected. In the conduct of hostilities, civilians and non-civilians have to be distinguished. Targeting civilians should be avoided at all costs by all sides. While meeting the Ethiopian Deputy Prime Minister myself yesterday, I also recalled the obligation of any party in the conflict, without distinction, to protect civilians and to ensure their safe and free movement. Furthermore, I called for full and unrestricted access for humanitarian aid and humanitarian workers to all areas affected by fighting, so that they're able to provide life-saving assistance. Honourable members, all partners of Ethiopia, and in particular its neighbours, should contribute to cessation of hostilities and to the resolution of political disputes through dialogue in the framework of the Constitution of Ethiopia. In that regard, the initiative by the African Union with the appointment of 3 high-level envoys is welcomed and supported by the European Union. Political solutions and the search for dialogue are the only viable option for the future of Ethiopia. The conflict has further increased inter-ethnic tensions, with reports of ethnically targeted measures, ethnic profiling and discrimination, hate speech and atrocities occurring. Jointly with High Representative Borrell, we expressed our deep concerns regarding these allegations. It is imperative that human rights are respected and that where abuses have occurred, they are investigated and those responsible held accountable. In conclusion, in line with the messages passed to the Deputy Prime Minister Mekkonen, we expect the Ethiopian government to show restraint and to avoid further escalation. Not to apply ethnic targeted violence or measures. This is a very sensitive issue for the European Union. We hold Prime Minister to his word that the government is making a distinction between the Tigrayan people and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. However, we have reports about blanket measures on the basis of ethnicity. Furthermore, we expect the government to allow unimpeded humanitarian access and to take all necessary measures to protect civilians, to ensure free access for media, and finally, and very importantly, to look for a political solution, a dialogue, a cessation of hostilities without delay. We encourage them to work with the African Union high-level envoys in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The debate is closed. The vote will be held today. The next